We all have that one mall memory, don't we? Maybe it's getting separated from your parents in a crowd, or that weird feeling when you're the last customer before closing time. Malls are supposed to be safe spaces, bright lights, security guards, plenty of people around. But what happens when the familiar becomes foreign? When the places designed for comfort start feeling like mazes with no exit? Tonight, we're walking through 3 stories that'll make you think twice about your next shopping trip. We've got a retail worker whose mannequins know way too much about her personal life, a college kid who stumbled into a section of mall that was supposed to be demolished decades ago, and a mother whose quick trip to the play area turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Each story reminds us that even in our most mundane, everyday spaces, reality can start to unravel at the seams. So next time you're wandering through those endless corridors of commerce, remember these tales, because sometimes the most terrifying thing about a mall isn't the overpriced food court, it's discovering what's really being served. Tonight's story comes to us from Meredith in Altoona, Pennsylvania. She sent this to us about her experience working late shifts at a department store in a dying mall. What begins as routine mannequin maintenance soon turns into something far more unsettling. We're calling this one the Manequin Shift. Here's Meredith's story. They say people are drawn to retail for different reasons. For me, it was the structure, the predictability, clock in, stock shelves, help customers take inventory, clock out, rinse and repeat. After my parents died, I craved that kind of routine. It kept me grounded when everything else felt like quicksand. I'd been working at Westbrook Department Store for almost 3 years when it happened. Westbrook was this old-school retailer hanging on by its fingernails in the Pinecrest Mall, one of those dying shopping centers built in the 80s that somehow survived the retail apocalypse. Most of the mall was shuttered storefronts with for-lease signs gathering dust, but we were still there, along with a GNC, a Hot Topic, and a Bath & Body Works. I'd started as a sales associate but worked my way up to assistant manager, mainly because I was willing to take the closing shifts no one else wanted. Winter in central Pennsylvania meant driving home at 11 p.m. through snow more often than not, but I didn't mind. My studio apartment was only 15 minutes away, and I'd gotten good at navigating the back roads. That winter was particularly brutal. January brought a series of storms that left Altoona buried under almost 3 feet of snow. The mall had been practically deserted for days, and that Tuesday night, my manager Diane called to say she couldn't make it in. "You'll be okay closing alone, right, Meredith?" she asked, the sound of her toddler screaming in the background. Jason's still sick, and Frank can't get his car out of his driveway. "I'll be fine," I told her, even as another 8 inches of snow was forecasted. Not like we'll have customers anyway. I was right about that part. We had exactly 6 customers all day, and by 7 at night, the mall was completely empty except for me and Carlos, the elderly security guard who'd been working there since the mall opened in 1983. He'd stop by occasionally, jingling his massive ring of keys to check if I was okay. "You should go home early, Miss Meredith," he told me during his 8 p.m. round. "Weather's getting bad. Roads will be closing soon." I glanced out the store's glass front at the empty mall corridor beyond. Diane would kill me if I closed early. Besides, I have to do the mannequin reset for the Valentine's display. Carlos nodded, understanding the retail obligations that transcended reasonable weather concerns. "I'll check back before I leave at 10. After he left, I locked the front gate halfway down, standard procedure when working alone, and went to get the first mannequin from the storeroom. We had 12 in total, 8 women, 4 men, all with those eerily smooth, featureless faces that somehow still managed to look slightly disapproving. The Valentine's display called for couples, pairing the mannequins together among hearts and flowers to model our date night collection. I'd sketched out the arrangement the day before, deciding where each would stand and what they'd wear. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. In the storeroom, the mannequins weren't where I'd left them. Instead of being neatly lined against the wall, they were clustered in the center of the room, arranged in a rough circle. I figured Frank, our stockroom manager, must have moved them while looking for something else. I grabbed the first female mannequin, the one I privately called Rebecca, because she reminded me of my childhood best friend, and wheeled her out to the sales floor. After positioning her near the front display, I went back for a male mannequin, but when I returned to the storeroom, the remaining mannequins had moved again. Not dramatically, just subtle shifts in position. One had its arm raised slightly, another had turned about 15 degrees. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the store's always too aggressive air conditioning. "Get it together, Meredith," I muttered to myself. "They're just mannequins." I wheeled out the male mannequin I called David, after my high school crush, and positioned him next to Rebecca. Then I headed back to the storeroom for the next pair. This time, I was certain the mannequins had moved. One was now facing the door directly, as if watching for my return. Another had both arms raised slightly, fingers splayed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stood frozen in the doorway. I pulled out my phone and took a quick picture, then forced myself to grab another female mannequin. As I was wheeling her out, I checked the photo. It showed the mannequins exactly as they'd been when I'd left them originally, lined up against the wall, not clustered in the center. I stared at my phone, then back at the mannequins, now clearly arranged in a circle. I almost called Diane right then. But what would I say? The mannequins are moving when I'm not looking? She already thought I was fragile after finding me crying in the break room last month on the anniversary of the car accident that killed my parents. Instead, I took a deep breath and continued working. I needed this job. My community college tuition for graphic design classes wasn't going to pay itself, and my tiny inheritance was almost depleted. By 9:30 p.m., I'd arranged 8 mannequins in the Valentine's display, 4 couples in various romantic poses. I still had 4 mannequins to dress and position, but as I headed back to the storeroom, my phone pinged with a weather alert. Blizzard warning upgraded, roads closing at 11 p.m. I decided to finish quickly and leave, but when I opened the storeroom door, I froze. The remaining mannequins weren't just arranged differently. They were positioned in a scene I recognized with sickening clarity. 2 female mannequins sat side by side, a male mannequin standing behind them. The 4th was lying on the floor, limbs akimbo. It was the exact configuration from the photo on my living room wall. Me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother Peter, the family portrait taken at Sears 3 months before the accident. The accident that killed everyone but me. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't possible. Nobody at work had ever been to my apartment. Nobody here even knew I had a brother. The mannequin on the floor, the one in Peter's position, had its head twisted at an unnatural angle, exactly the way my brother's had been when they pulled him from the wreckage. I backed away, bumping into shelves of inventory. A box of hangers crashed to the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the empty store. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone here? Carlos?" No answer. I nearly ran back to the sales floor, grabbing my phone to call security. But before I could dial, I noticed something about the mannequins in my Valentine's display. They had moved too, not just subtle shifts this time. They had completely rearranged themselves. The couples were no longer facing each other romantically. All 8 mannequins were now facing the storeroom door, facing me. And they were wearing different clothes. I recognized the blue cardigan on one female mannequin instantly. It was identical to the one my mother had worn constantly. Another wore a plaid shirt like my father's favorite. A smaller female mannequin wore a soccer jersey with the number 12, Peter's number. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone. When I bent to retrieve it, I noticed something on the floor by the mannequin's feet. Small, white rectangles. Name tags. I inched closer, my heart pounding so hard I could feel my pulse in my temples. The name tags read Elizabeth, Robert, Peter, and Meredith. My family's names, my name. I ran for the exit, no longer caring about closing procedures or the register or anything except getting out. But as I reached the security gate, I realized something that made my blood freeze. The gate was now fully closed and padlocked from the outside. I hadn't done that. I couldn't have. The key was still in my pocket. "Carlos!" I screamed, rattling the gate. "Carlos, are you there? Let me out!" The mall beyond was dark, the security lights casting long shadows down the empty corridor. No sign of Carlos or anyone else. My phone showed no service, common during bad storms in our area. The mall's Wi-Fi was down too. I turned back to face the sales floor, pressing my back against the gate. All 12 mannequins were now arranged throughout the store, positioned to recreate scenes from my life. 2 sat at what looked like a dining table configuration, a third standing nearby with its arm extended, holding a coat hanger like a serving spoon. Sunday dinners, my mother always serving from the stovetop. 4 others were arranged in the furniture section in front of our largest TV display, the exact way my family used to sit for movie nights, Peter always on the floor with his favorite blanket. But most disturbing was the scene by the jewelry counter. 4 mannequins in a car-like formation, contorted into impossible positions, limbs at wrong angles, heads twisted. The accident. A mannequin in the driver's seat position wore my mother's blue cardigan. The one in the passenger seat had my father's plaid shirt. In the back seat, the Peter mannequin was broken, one arm completely detached, and the 4th mannequin, the one wearing clothes identical to what I'd worn that day, was positioned half out of the car, just as I'd been thrown clear of the wreckage. I slid down the gate to the floor, unable to stand as my legs gave way beneath me. This couldn't be happening. Mannequins don't move. They don't dress themselves in copies of your dead family's clothes. They don't recreate your worst trauma. But even as I tried to convince myself I was hallucinating or dreaming, the mannequins moved again, not gliding or walking, but shifting positions when I blinked or looked away, getting closer each time. The one wearing my clothes, my doppelganger, moved fastest. Each time I looked away and back, it was several feet closer. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the manager's office, locking the door behind me. Through the office window that overlooked the sales floor, I could see them still advancing, their blank faces somehow accusing. The office phone was dead. The computer showed no internet connection. Outside, the storm had intensified, snow swirling against the darkness. I huddled under the desk, watching through the window as my mannequin family surrounded the office door. Hours passed. Occasionally, I heard scratching at the door, not like human hands, but like plastic limbs dragging across wood. Around 3 a.m., the scratching stopped. By 4 a.m., when I finally gathered the courage to peek through the window again, the mannequins had returned to the sales floor. They were back in normal display positions, wearing their original clothing. I waited until daylight before unlocking the office door. The store looked perfectly normal. Mannequins in proper places, no name tags on the floor, no sign of the tableaus from the night before. Carlos found me at 7 a.m. when he came to unlock the mall. He was shocked I'd spent the night, saying he'd checked our store before leaving but couldn't find me, assuming I'd already gone home. "The roads were closed anyway," he said. "Probably safer you stayed here." I quit that day. Diane was understanding, especially when I lied about having panic attacks due to claustrophobia. I focused on my graphic design classes, found a job at a print shop, and tried to forget. But I couldn't, because sometimes, when I'm alone in public places, waiting rooms, restaurants, department stores, I notice mannequins or display figures arranged in familiar scenes. A family dinner, movie night, always just at the edge of my vision, reverting to normal positions when I look directly at them. Last week, I saw one in a store window wearing the exact outfit I had on that day, an outfit I'd bought online and never worn in public before. It was watching me. They all are, waiting for me to join my family in their perfect plastic stillness. I keep the blinds closed now, I don't look in mirrors, and I sleep with the lights on, afraid of what might be rearranging itself in the darkness while I'm not watching. Thank you, Meredith, for sharing that chilling experience with us. I know many of our listeners who've worked retail have stories about mannequins feeling unsettling, but yours takes that feeling to an entirely different level. If you're listening and have your own unexplained experience to share, send it to us through our website. Until next time, remember to keep your eyes open, especially when it feels like something's watching you back. Tonight, I've got a story from one of our listeners in Michigan that caught my attention immediately. If you've ever worked a summer job that felt like it would never end, this one might hit close to home. But for Jake, his summer at Lakeside Mall took a turn that none of us could have anticipated. Let's dive into what he calls the wing that never closed. I needed the money. That's what I keep telling myself whenever I think back to that summer. I was going into my junior year at Michigan State, the first person in my family to attend college, and I was drowning in student loans. My accounting major wasn't exactly paying dividends yet, and my parents had made it clear that while they were proud of me, their factory wages couldn't stretch to cover my tuition. So when I returned to Sterling Heights for summer break in 2019, I took the first job I could find, cashier at Walk This Way in the Lakeside Mall food court. The mall had been dying a slow death for years. I remembered how packed it used to be when I was a kid, but now whole sections stood empty, with more space available signs than actual stores. The food court was still somewhat busy during lunch hours, but by evening it was a ghost town. Marcy, my manager, was a 40-something woman with bleached blonde hair who'd been working there since the mall opened in the 80s. She knew everything about Lakeside and treated the place like it was still in its prime. This mall used to have a waiting list for retail space, she told me during my first week, wiping down the counter with the same orange rag she'd been using all day. You should have seen the grand opening. People lined up around the block just to get in. I nodded politely while scooping orange chicken into containers, listening to her reminisce about the glory days. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering occasionally in that way that gives you a headache after an 8-hour shift. The first strange thing I noticed was the maintenance door. It was located in our storage area behind stacks of bulk rice bags and industrial-sized soy sauce containers. I'd gone back there to grab more napkins when I realized I'd never seen anyone use it. Unlike the other service doors, marked with employees-only signs, this one had no marking at all, just a plain gray metal door with a push bar. "Hey, Marcy," I asked during a slow period, "where does that back door in storage lead to?" She frowned, setting down the schedule she'd been working on. "What door?" "The gray one, behind the rice. I was wondering if it goes to the loading dock or something." "Oh," she said, her expression clearing. "That old thing. It doesn't go anywhere useful anymore. It used to connect to the West Wing before they demolished it in 2002. Now it probably just opens to a wall." I nodded, but something about her explanation didn't sit right. I remembered the West Wing vaguely from childhood. It had housed a Montgomery Ward and some other stores, but I couldn't recall it being demolished. Then again, I was only about 5 when it supposedly happened. A week later, I was working a closing shift with Dennis, a community college student who spent most of his time vaping in the bathroom. At around 8:45, 15 minutes before closing, Dennis asked if I could grab more sweet and sour sauce from storage while he cleaned the fryers. The storage room was always cold, with that distinct smell of cardboard and soy sauce. As I rummaged through the shelves, I heard something from beyond the maintenance door, a sound like music, muffled but unmistakable. It was playing "Take My Breath Away" by Berlin, which struck me as odd. I froze, sauce packets in hand, and listened. The music continued, along with what sounded like the ambient noise of a crowd, that indistinct murmur of multiple conversations happening simultaneously. My first thought was that someone had left a radio on in whatever space was beyond the door. I approached it cautiously, my curiosity overriding my better judgment. I expected resistance when I pushed the bar, maybe even finding it locked. Instead, it opened smoothly, revealing not a wall, as Marcy had suggested, but a well-lit corridor. I stood in the doorway, blinking in confusion. The hallway had that same beige tile flooring as the rest of the mall, with wood-paneled walls and recessed lighting. It curved slightly to the right, preventing me from seeing where it led. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly. No response, but the music continued. Common sense told me to close the door and get back to work. Instead, I stepped forward, letting the door swing shut behind me. I told myself I'd just take a quick peek, satisfy my curiosity, and head back before Dennis noticed I was gone. As I rounded the curve, The corridor opened up into what was unmistakably a mall concourse, but not the sad, half-empty mall I worked in. This space was vibrant, with all storefronts occupied and illuminated. There were people shopping, walking between stores with bags in hand, sitting on benches and chatting near a central fountain that I could hear bubbling around the corner. I stood frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. The storefronts had names I vaguely recognized from childhood. B. Dalton Bookseller, Sam Goody, Montgomery Ward visible in the distance. The distinctive brown and orange color scheme that Lakeside had updated in the early 2000s was intact here. Even the plants looked different, large ficus trees in brown hexagonal planters instead of the sad palms in our section. But strangest of all were the shoppers. Their clothes looked off. Women with enormous shoulder pads and teased hair, men in pleated pants and polo shirts with the collars turned up. A group of teenagers with neon colors and side ponytails. It was like walking onto the set of a movie set in the late 80s. I felt dizzy, like I might pass out. This couldn't be real. The West Wing had been demolished almost 20 years ago. I must be hallucinating, or maybe I'd fallen asleep in the storage room. A woman walked past me, giving me a polite smile. She carried a Montgomery Ward shopping bag and wore a denim jacket with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Her hair was permed in a style I'd only seen in old photographs. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cracking slightly. What mall is this?" She looked at me like I was making a strange joke. "Lakeside, of course." Then she continued walking, her white keds squeaking slightly on the tile floor. I stumbled to a nearby directory, the kind with the "You Are Here" arrow. It showed the complete mall layout, including the West Wing, the wing I was standing in, with no indication that anything was amiss. According to the directory, I was looking at the fully intact Lakeside Mall, circa 1987, based on the store listings. My heart pounding, I checked my phone. No signal, but the time showed 8:52 p.m. I'd been gone for barely 5 minutes, though it felt much longer. Dennis would be wondering where I was. I turned back toward the corridor I'd come through, walking as quickly as I could without running. The music, now playing "Never Gonna Give You Up," seemed to follow me, even as I pushed through the maintenance door and back into the storage room. The door closed behind me with a soft click. The storage room was exactly as I'd left it, sauce packets still in my hand, the fluorescent light still flickering overhead. I stood there breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Dude, what took you so long?" Dennis asked when I returned to the counter. "I've already cleaned everything." "Sorry," I mumbled, setting down the sauce packets. "I couldn't find them at first." I finished my shift in a daze, mechanically wiping down counters and taking out trash. I didn't mention what I'd seen to Dennis. He'd assume I was high or messing with him. Instead, I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. That night, I researched the mall's history online. According to local news archives, the West Wing had indeed been demolished in 2002 to make way for a planned expansion that never materialized due to funding issues. There were even before and after photos showing the wing being torn down, leaving nothing but an empty lot that eventually became additional parking. I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing, stress and exhaustion creating a vivid hallucination. But the next day at work, I couldn't stop thinking about it. During my break, I walked around the exterior of the mall to where the West Wing should have been. Sure enough, there was just a parking lot with a few scattered cars. For a week, I avoided the storage room as much as possible, asking other employees to grab supplies when needed. But curiosity is a powerful force, and by the following Tuesday, I found myself volunteering to do inventory, which meant spending an hour alone in storage. I finished counting stock as quickly as possible, then stood before the maintenance door, heart racing. This time, I pressed my ear against it first. Nothing. No music, no voices, just silence. I should have left it at that, but I needed to know if I'd imagined everything, so I pushed the bar and opened the door. The corridor was there, exactly as before. I stepped through cautiously, letting the door close behind me. As I rounded the curve, I again found myself in the bustling West Wing, unchanged from my previous visit. Same stores, same 80s decor, same oddly dressed shoppers. This time, I forced myself to walk deeper into the wing, passing stores I remembered from childhood. The sweet smell of Cinnabon filled the air near the food court. A Spencer Gifts displayed posters and lava lamps in its windows. Everything felt solid and real. I could touch the walls, feel the air conditioning on my skin, hear the squeak of my shoes on the tile. I stopped at Sam Goody, staring at the display of cassette tapes and early CDs in the window. A new release sign promoted Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. "Can I help you find something?" I jumped at the voice behind me. A young man in a Sam Goody uniform, polo shirt with the store logo, smiled at me. His name tag read Kevin. "I'm just looking," I managed to say. "Let me know if you need anything. We just got the new U2 album in yesterday." I nodded and continued walking, passing a group of teenage girls with crimped hair and denim jackets covered in buttons. They giggled as they walked past, one of them glancing back at me with a smile. Near the center of the wing, I found the food court, smaller than the one where I worked, but with many of the same chains in earlier iterations of their branding. There was even a Walk This Way, though its logo was different, more angular and neon. I approached the directory again, studying it more carefully. According to the map, this wing connected to the rest of the mall through the main concourse, the very same concourse that, in my reality, ended in a wall where the West Wing had been demolished. I had to see for myself. I followed the directory's guidance toward the main concourse, passing more shoppers who paid me little attention. As I approached where the connection should be, my stomach dropped. Instead of opening to the familiar main concourse, the hallway simply continued around another curve, leading back into the West Wing in an impossible loop. This time, I noticed something else, a large banner hanging from the ceiling announcing Summer Sale, June 1987. My mouth went dry. It wasn't just the stores and the people that were from the 80s. It was actually 1987 in this version of the mall. I needed to leave. I turned and practically ran back toward the maintenance corridor, dodging shoppers who gave me strange looks. When I reached the door and pushed through to the storage room, I was sweating and shaking. I leaned against the shelves, trying to steady my breathing. My phone showed I'd been gone for 17 minutes, though it had felt like much longer. "Jake, you okay in there?" Marcy called from the kitchen. "Yeah," I called back, my voice higher than normal, "just finishing inventory." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the West Wing, the shoppers, the banner with the date. It wasn't possible, and yet I'd walked through it, breathed its air, nearly been offered help buying a U2 cassette. The next day, I arrived early for my shift, determined to talk to Marcy about the door. I found her in the office, counting the previous day's receipts. "Marcy," I said, closing the door behind me, "I need to ask you about that maintenance door again." She looked up, her expression oddly guarded. "What about it?" "I opened it yesterday," I admitted. "It doesn't lead to a wall. It goes to the West Wing, but it's different, like it's still the 80s in there." I expected her to laugh or call me crazy. Instead, she carefully set down the stack of receipts and sighed. "You shouldn't have done that, Jake." My blood ran cold. "You know about it." She nodded slowly. "Most of the long-term employees do. We don't talk about it, and we definitely don't go through that door." "But what is it? How is it possible?" "I don't know," she said, looking down at her hands. "It's been that way since they demolished the wing. One day it was gone, and the next, well, it was still there, but only through that door. Management boarded it up at first, but it always reappeared. Eventually, they just put up a new wall in the main concourse and pretended the door in our storage room doesn't exist." "Have you been through it?" I asked. She nodded. "Once, years ago, I saw my younger self working at Orange Julius." Her voice cracked slightly. "I never went back." "But the people in there, are they real? Are they ghosts or something?" "They're real enough," she said, "but they don't know. They think they're just shopping at the mall. They don't realize they're stuck." I thought about Kevin from Sam Goody, The giggling teenagers, the woman in the denim jacket. Were they all trapped in some kind of time loop, reliving 1987 forever? "I need to know more," I said. "I'm going back." Marcy's face hardened. "Don't. Nothing good comes from messing with that place. Why do you think I've worked here for 30 years? I can't leave. None of the long-timers can." "What do you mean you can't leave?" She stood up abruptly. "Forget I said anything. Just stay away from that door, Jake. Promise me." But I couldn't promise. Over the next week, I made 3 more trips through the door, each time staying a little longer. I explored the entire West Wing, noting how it always remained in June 1987, with the same music playing, the same sales in the windows. On my 3rd visit, I bought a soda from the food court. The cashier gave me change for my $1, 2 quarters, a dime, and a nickel. When I examined them later, back in the storage room, I found they were all minted in 1986 or earlier. On my 4th visit, I saw Marcy, a younger version of her with dark hair instead of blonde, working at Orange Julius, just as she'd described. She didn't recognize me when I ordered a drink, smiling the practiced smile of a food court employee. "Have you worked here long?" I asked as she handed me my change. "About a year," she replied. "It's just until I finish my business degree." I felt a chill, knowing that the real Marcy, my Marcy, had never finished that degree. Instead, she'd spent 3 decades managing a dying food court stall. As fascinating as these visits were, I began to notice something disturbing. After each trip, it became harder to leave. The corridor seemed longer, the door back to storage more difficult to find, and once I returned, I felt a powerful urge to go back, like an addict craving a fix. During my 5th visit, I decided to try something different. I approached a security guard standing near the fountain. "Excuse me," I said, "can you tell me how to get to the East Wing?" He looked at me strangely. "You're in it, sir. This is the East Wing." My stomach dropped. "No, this is the West Wing, the Montgomery Ward Wing." The guard shook his head. "Sir, Montgomery Ward is in the West Wing, on the other side of the mall. This is the East Wing." I thanked him and walked away, confused. Had I somehow entered a different version of the mall? Or was the place itself changing, rewriting its own geography? When I returned to the storage room after that visit, I found that 43 minutes had passed, though it had felt like only 15. Time was moving differently on the other side. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but for a different reason. I kept thinking about what Marcy had said. I can't leave. None of the long-timers can. What did that mean? Were they somehow bound to the mall because of the door? Was I putting myself at risk by continuing to go through it? I decided my next visit would be my last. I would take photos with my phone as evidence, then never go back. But when I arrived at work the next day, Marcy pulled me aside immediately. "You've been going back, haven't you?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. I couldn't lie. "Yes." "How many times?" 5. She closed her eyes briefly. "It's already too late then." "What do you mean?" She led me to the break room and closed the door. "Listen carefully. Everyone who works here long-term has gone through that door more than once. It's like it calls to you, and once you've gone through enough times, you start to belong to it." "That's ridiculous," I said, though my mouth had gone dry. "Is it? Why do you think people stay at these dead-end mall jobs for decades? It's not by choice." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small Sam Goody logo tattooed on her wrist. "I worked there before Orange Julius, back in '85. Every long-timer has a mark like this from where they first worked in the mall." I stared at the tattoo. "I don't understand." "Check your wrist," she said. With trembling fingers, I pushed up my sleeve. There, on my inner wrist, was a faint outline. Not quite a tattoo, but a sort of shadow under the skin in the shape of the Walk This Way logo. "It gets darker with each visit," Marcy said quietly. "Once it's fully formed, you're bound here. You'll never work anywhere else, never want to. The mall keeps you." I rubbed at my wrist, but the mark didn't fade. "How do I stop it?" "You can't. All you can do is never go through that door again and hope it's not too late. I tried to follow her advice. For 2 weeks, I avoided the storage room entirely, asking others to fetch supplies when needed. The mark on my wrist neither faded nor darkened, remaining a ghostly outline just visible in certain light, but the pull was undeniable. I found myself thinking about the West Wing constantly. The music, the stores, the strange looping geography. I dreamed about it at night, walking endless corridors that shifted and changed around me. And then came my final shift. It was a Thursday evening in late August, just days before I was scheduled to return to school. Dennis had called in sick, leaving me to close alone. As I wiped down the counters after the last customer left, I felt the maintenance door calling to me from storage, like a physical tug. Just one more time, I told myself, one last visit before I left for school and put this all behind me. The storage room was eerily quiet as I approached the door. When I pushed it open, the corridor beyond seemed darker than before, the lights dimmer. Still, I stepped through, letting the door swing shut behind me. As I rounded the curve, I knew immediately that something was different. The West Wing was still there, still filled with 80s stores and 80s people, but everything seemed slightly translucent, as if I was seeing it through a veil. And interspersed among the 80s shoppers were others, people in 90s, flannel and baggy jeans, early 2000s styles, even some in contemporary clothing. They all moved through the space as if unaware of each other, shopping in stores that simultaneously appeared as their 80s, 90s, and 2000s iterations, layered on top of each other like a photographic double exposure. In the center of it all stood a woman I recognized instantly, Marcy, but not my Marcy. This was an older version of her, with gray hair instead of blonde, wearing a Walk This Way uniform I didn't recognize. She saw me and her face fell. "Oh, Jake, I'd hoped you wouldn't come back." "What is this place?" I asked, gesturing at the overlapping realities around us. "It's every version of the mall that ever existed, all at once," she said. "Every year, every store, every shopper. Time doesn't work right here. Why didn't you warn me more clearly?" She gave me a sad smile. "Would you have believed me? Besides, it wouldn't have mattered. Once you've seen it, you're already caught." I looked down at my wrist. The Walk This Way logo was now a clear, dark mark against my skin, as distinct as a real tattoo. "So I'm trapped here, working at the mall forever?" "Not exactly," she said. "You'll go back to school, finish your degree even, but you'll find yourself returning to mall work wherever you go, and eventually you'll come back here, because this is where we all end up." She gestured to the overlapping crowds. "Everyone who ever worked here long enough to go through that door. We're all part of the mall now, across every version of it that ever existed or will exist." As she spoke, I noticed more employees among the shoppers, wearing uniforms from different decades, all with the same hollow look in their eyes that I'd sometimes seen in Marcy's. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Time moves differently for each of us, but I've watched them all die and be reborn countless times." I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the implications. "I need to leave. I need to get back." "You can," she said, "for now. But remember, the door goes both ways, and eventually you'll be on this side permanently." I turned and ran, pushing through crowds that felt increasingly insubstantial. The corridor seemed miles long now, stretching endlessly before me. By the time I reached the maintenance door, I was gasping for breath. I burst back into the storage room, expecting to find it just as I'd left it. Instead, everything was covered in a fine layer of dust. The shelves were half empty, with products I didn't recognize. When I stumbled out to the food court, I found it dark and deserted. The Walk This Way counter was clean, but clearly hadn't been used in some time. A large sign hung from the ceiling. "Thank you for 40 years, Lakeside Mall. Closing sale. Everything must go." My phone showed the date, August 15th, 2029, 10 years in the future. I ran to the mall exit, pushing through doors that were covered with closing notices. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. The few cars there models I didn't recognize. I managed to find my way home, only to discover my parents had moved years ago. Through a series of confused phone calls, I learned that I had been reported missing in 2019, presumed dead after an extensive search found no trace of me. The Jake Thornton who disappeared that summer was legally declared dead in 2026. The Jake Thornton who returned found himself a stranger in a world that had moved on without him. My friends were married with children. My college had closed due to funding cuts, and my parents had aged a decade overnight. I never told anyone the truth about where I'd been. How could I? Instead, I invented a story about amnesia and living off the grid, a story full of holes but easier to accept than the reality. I should be grateful I made it back at all. But sometimes I find myself driving past what used to be Lakeside Mall, now demolished completely, replaced by a mixed-use development with apartments and boutique shops. I park my car and stare at the spot where the food court once stood, feeling the mark on my wrist burn like a brand. And late at night, when I can't sleep, I sometimes hear faint music, the hits of 1987, 1995, 2003, 2019, playing from nowhere and everywhere at once. I know then that the mall isn't really gone. It's just waiting, in its own pocket of fractured time, for me to find my way back through a door that shouldn't exist. I know I will, eventually. We all do. The mall keeps what belongs to it. Well, folks, I don't know about you, but I might think twice before applying for that summer job at the local shopping center. If you've had any strange experiences while working retail, or if you've encountered places that shouldn't exist, send your stories to the email in our show notes. Today, we have a particularly unsettling listener submission from Phoenix, Arizona. As always, we've verified the details as much as possible, but we'll leave it to you to decide what to believe. Here's Melissa's story, titled, Mommy Will Be Right Back, *. I've worked in retail management for almost a decade now, and back-to-school season is always our busiest time. Parents flood the stores, armed with supply lists and cranky children who'd rather be anywhere else. I understand their pain. I'm one of those parents, too. My daughter Lily was 7 last August when this happened. We were at Desert Ridge Marketplace, that sprawling outdoor mall in Northeast Phoenix. If you're not from here, it's this massive shopping complex with palm trees and those misters they spray to keep you from melting in the 110-degree heat. Even with the misters, shopping in August in Phoenix is like walking through soup. I'd been putting off our back-to-school shopping because, frankly, I was dreading it. Single mom, full-time job as a department manager at Nordstrom, and a daughter who'd recently developed very specific opinions about everything from pencil cases to sock colors. But school was starting in 4 days, and we couldn't delay any longer. My sister Amber was supposed to come with us. She's always been good at keeping Lily entertained, but she called that morning with a migraine. I remember standing in my kitchen, staring at the half-empty bottle of Excedrin on the counter while Lily ate her Cinnamon Toast Crunch and thinking, this is going to be a rough day. I wasn't wrong, just not for the reasons I expected. We arrived at the mall around 11 a.m. I'd promised Lily we could hit the food court after shopping, maybe get those cheese fries she loves from Potato Corner. It was my way of bribing her through the ordeal. The mall was packed, of course. The combination of back-to-school shopping and people escaping the August heat had turned the place into a maze of stressed parents and whining children. We hit Target first for the basics. Lily was being surprisingly cooperative, helping me find things on her school list and only begging for one sparkly unicorn folder that wasn't on the list. I gave in. Pick your battles, right? By 1 p.m., we'd knocked out most of the essentials and were headed to get shoes. It happened at Journeys. Lily needed new sneakers, and I was trying to navigate her away from the light-up Princess Ones towards something that wouldn't fall apart after 2 weeks on the playground. I remember kneeling down, trying to convince her to try on a pair of sturdy Nikes when my phone rang. It was work, a crisis with a shipment that was supposed to arrive for our fall fashion preview. I stood up and took 2 steps away, still within arm's reach of Lily, and turned slightly to hear better over the mall noise. The call lasted maybe 40 seconds. When I turned back, Lily was gone. I'm sure every parent knows that feeling. That instant, heart-stopping panic when your child isn't where they're supposed to be. I called her name, probably too loudly. The salesgirl looked up, startled. I scanned the store, checked under the display tables, asked if anyone had seen a little girl in a purple t-shirt with a unicorn on it. Nothing. I ran out into the mall corridor, my eyes darting everywhere. The crowd seemed to have doubled in size and density, a sea of strangers flowing past me. I called her name again, my voice cracking. A security guard noticed me and approached. His name tag read Miguel. He was young, maybe early 20s, with a wispy attempt at a mustache that reminded me of my nephew's first efforts at facial hair. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" he asked, and I explained between gasping breaths that my daughter was missing, just disappeared. She was wearing purple. She's 7. She has a gap where her front teeth should be. Miguel radioed it in while I stood there, trying not to vomit from anxiety. He told me kids usually don't go far, that they often head to the toy store or the play area. The play area, of course. Lily had been begging to go there earlier, and I'd promised we would after shopping. The indoor play area was on the lower level, near the food court, one of those padded obstacle course setups surrounded by benches where exhausted parents sit scrolling through their phones while their kids burn off energy. Miguel escorted me there, still talking into his radio, describing Lily to other security personnel. The play area was crowded, but not packed. I scanned the climbing structures, the foam blocks, the little slide, and there she was. Relief flooded through me so intensely, my knees nearly buckled. Lily was sitting in the corner of the play area near a small table with coloring books. She wasn't alone. She was talking to 3 other children, 2 girls and a boy. They looked to be around her age, maybe a bit older. I called her name and she looked up, waved, but didn't get up. Instead, she turned back to continue whatever conversation they were having. "There she is," I said to Miguel, who nodded and spoke into his radio again, canceling the alert. He asked if I needed anything else, and I thanked him, said I was fine now. As he walked away, I approached the play area, my relief quickly shifting to irritation. How could she just wander off like that? As I got closer, I noticed something odd about the children Lily was talking to. Their clothes looked wrong. Not dirty or damaged, just outdated. The boy was wearing corduroy pants with a polo shirt that had a wide collar, like something from a 70s sitcom. One of the girls had on a denim overall dress over a turtleneck, very 90s, and her hair was held back with those butterfly clips that were popular when I was in middle school. The other girl wore a windbreaker with geometric patterns in teal and purple that screamed early 90s. I reached the edge of the play area and called to Lily again. "Honey, you can't just wander off like that. You scared me to death." She looked up, not particularly concerned. "I was just talking to my new friend's mom. This is Jenny, and that's Michael, and that's Kayla." The children looked at me but didn't speak. Something about their expressions made my skin prickle. They weren't hostile, just expectant, like they were waiting for something. "Well, it's time to go," I said, holding out my hand. "We still need to get your shoes." Lily pouted. "But Mom, they've been waiting a really long time. Can't we stay a little longer?" "Waiting for what?" I asked, glancing at the other children again. None of them had moved. None of them had toys or books. They were just sitting there. "For their parents," Lily said, as if it was obvious. Jenny's mom went to Macy's and said she'd be right back. Michael's dad went to the food court. Kayla's mom went to the bathroom. I looked around the play area at the surrounding benches. No adults seemed to be watching these children. How long have they been waiting? It was the boy, Michael, who answered. His voice was soft but clear. "I've been here since my dad went to get nachos, October 18th, 1987. I felt a chill run through me, despite the mall's warmth. "What?" The girl in the denim dress, Jenny, spoke next. "My mom said she needed to return something at Macy's. She said she'd be right back. That was in 1995. Kayla, The girl in the windbreaker just stared at me with wide eyes. My mom had to go to the bathroom. It was back to school shopping, like today. I looked at these children more carefully now. Their skin had an almost translucent quality, like paper held up to light. And despite the busy play area, no other children were interacting with them. In fact, as I watched, a little boy ran right past them, almost through them, without acknowledging their presence. My mouth went dry. "Lily, honey, we need to go, right now." "But, Mom..." "Right now, Lily." I reached over the low wall of the play area and grabbed her arm, perhaps more roughly than I intended. She protested but came with me. As I pulled her away, I looked back at the 3 children. They hadn't moved. They just watched us go with those same expectant expressions. "Mom, you're hurting me," Lily complained as I hurried her toward the escalator. I loosened my grip but kept moving. "I'm sorry, but we need to go." "But Jenny said her mom is coming back soon. She's been waiting a really long time." I didn't respond. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen and heard. Children who'd been waiting for decades? Clothing from different eras? It had to be some kind of prank or misunderstanding. We rode the escalator in silence, Lily sulking beside me. When we reached the upper level, I spotted the security guard, Miguel, talking to another guard near the information desk. I hesitated, then approached them. "Excuse me," I said. Miguel turned, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Those children in the play area, the ones my daughter was talking to, do you know who they are?" Miguel looked confused. "Which children, ma'am?" "Your daughter was alone when I saw her." "No, there were 3 others, 2 girls and a boy." I described them, including their unusual clothing. The 2 guards exchanged glances. The other guard, an older man with salt and pepper hair and a name tag reading Dennis, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, would you mind stepping over here for a moment?" He gestured to the information desk, away from the flow of shoppers. I followed, still holding Lily's hand tightly. Dennis leaned in, speaking quietly. "We sometimes get reports like this, about children in the play area that might not be there." "What do you mean, might not be there?" "I saw them. My daughter was talking to them." Dennis glanced at his younger colleague, then back to me. "The mall's been here since 1982. Over the years, there have been incidents. Missing children." My stomach dropped. "Missing children?" He nodded slowly. "Nothing recent. Most from the 80s and 90s. But we occasionally get reports from parents or other children about seeing kids in outdated clothing, usually in the play area, saying they're waiting for their parents." I felt lightheaded suddenly. Miguel must have noticed because he quickly pulled over a chair from behind the information desk. I sat down, pulling Lily close to me. "Would you like to see something?" Dennis asked. Without waiting for an answer, he ducked behind the information desk and emerged with a thin folder. He opened it and carefully laid several papers on the counter. They were missing person flyers, yellowed with age, and there they were, Jenny, Michael, and Kayla. Different names on the flyers, but unmistakably the same children. The boy had disappeared in 1987, one girl in 1995, the other in 2002, all during back-to-school shopping, all last seen in this mall. "We keep these as a reminder," Dennis said quietly, "to stay vigilant, especially during busy seasons." I stared at the flyers, then at Lily, who was fidgeting beside me, oblivious to my horror. "But how... why..." Dennis shook his head. "I don't know, ma'am. I've worked here 22 years. All I know is sometimes children see things adults don't." I thanked him, my voice barely audible, and led Lily away. We abandoned our shopping and headed straight for the exit. As we passed by the lower level again, I couldn't help but look toward the play area. It was still crowded with children, but I didn't see the 3 Lily had been talking to. What I did see stopped me cold. Near the play area entrance stood a woman in a floral dress with shoulder pads and permed hair, straight out of the late 80s. She was scanning the play area anxiously. Beside her was a man in pleated khakis and a tucked-in polo shirt, very 90s, also looking worried. A third adult, a woman in low-rise jeans and a baby tee typical of the early 2000s, was checking her watch and craning her neck to see over the crowd. None of the other adults in the vicinity seemed to notice them. A teenager walked right through the space where the 90s man was standing, like he wasn't there at all. I blinked and they were gone. We made it to the car, and I buckled Lily into her booster seat with shaking hands. As I started the engine, Lily asked, "Mom, why didn't those kids' parents come back for them?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "I don't know, honey." Jenny said her mom promised she'd be right back. She's been waiting a really long time. I pulled out of the parking space, eager to get as far from Desert Ridge as possible. Sometimes people make promises they can't keep. Are they going to be okay? I didn't know how to answer that. I hope so. We drove in silence for a while. Then Lily said something that made my blood freeze. They asked if I wanted to wait with them. They said it's not so bad once you get used to it. I glanced in the rearview mirror again. Lily was looking out the window, her expression thoughtful. "What did you tell them?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I said I couldn't. I said my mom always comes back. I had to pull over then, tears blurring my vision. I parked on a side street and turned to look at my daughter directly. "That's right, Lily. I will always, always come back for you." She smiled, seemingly untroubled by the whole experience. "I know, Mom. That's what I told them." We finished our back-to-school shopping the next day at a different mall. I didn't let go of Lily's hand once. It's been almost a year now. I've never gone back to Desert Ridge, though Lily asks about it sometimes. Specifically, she asks about those children and whether their parents ever came back for them. I don't know what to tell her. Last week, I was sorting through some old receipts when I found something that nearly stopped my heart. It was a security guard's name tag, Miguel. I have no memory of taking it, no idea how it ended up among my papers, but what disturbs me most is what I found when I turned it over. On the back, in faded blue ink, was a date, August 15th, 1987. I've looked up news reports from that time. There was indeed a security guard named Miguel Ortiz who disappeared from Desert Ridge Marketplace during his shift in August 1987. He was 22 years old. Witnesses reported seeing him escorting a distressed mother looking for her missing child. Neither Miguel nor the child was ever found. I don't know what's happening in that mall. I don't know if those children are ghosts or something else entirely. But I do know one thing with absolute certainty. I will never let Lily out of my sight in a public place again, because there are some promises you have to keep, no matter what, and I'll be right back should never be a lie. Those mannequins you walk past without a second thought, the play areas where parents drop their kids for a few minutes of peace, the maintenance doors marked employees only. Maybe it's time we started paying closer attention. Because after hearing about mannequins that knew too much, the discovery of a mall wing that shouldn't exist, and an encounter with children who've been waiting far too long, we're reminded that the most ordinary places can harbor the most extraordinary secrets. Next time you're at the mall, whether you're grabbing a quick bite, browsing for deals, or just people watching, remember that retail therapy isn't always therapeutic. Sometimes the price of admission is more than you bargained for. And the most dangerous thing about shopping centers isn't the credit card debt. It's finding out what price you're really paying.